Microphone's on, of course. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's great to have you here on another Novation live stream. Yeah, my name's CALC. I'm here in my little home studio down in Brighton in the UK. And this evening, as it is in the UK, we're going to take a look at something a little bit kind of away from the normal side of things. We're going to take a look at the Novation Launchpad, of course, but we're going to take a look at it in a way that perhaps is a little bit more kind of out there, if you like, a little bit off the beaten track. Yeah, we're going to take a look at the Launchpad. Here it is set up, but we're going to take a look at it in conjunction with this little box here, which is a really quite a wonderful little device. This is called the Norns music computer, I guess. And Norns is essentially, well, I think it's a Raspberry Pi based computer that is essentially kind of wrapped up in this thing, what we call a shield, which is giving it audio inputs and outputs, and also a screen. And essentially the Norns is kind of a fully fledged music computer. You can do a lot of stuff with Norns. In fact, far too much for us to be able to get through this evening. Now, a little bit of kind of history, I suppose, before we crack on into kind of how we can use this little box. The Launchpad originally came through quite a long time ago, and Launchpad was essentially one of the very first kind of devices designed as a grid-based controller for exclusively, really, back in the original days for Ableton Live software. So it was the first time really that a grid-based controller had been developed for controlling Ableton Live. And it went through a number of kind of iterations, a number of kind of different versions. Of course, the original Launchpad then became the Launchpad S, I think, and then we had the Launchpad Mark II, and now we're settled into the Launchpad Mark III range. And the range has expanded as well. So initially we started off with a grid kind of this sort of size. It was only kind of 3 colours instead of full colours on that. And then, of course, the Launchpad Mini came along, and then the Launchpad Pro, and now we have those 3 things in the range. And as you can see with Launchpad, it's a box with a lot of different buttons on it, and these are kind of configurable to do lots of different things. So with Ableton Live, of course, you can launch your clips. We have a note mode now, so we can play notes on any kind of instrument, really, synthesizer or DAW software. And we also have custom modes as well that allow us to kind of create our own kind of custom control surfaces within the Launchpad too. Now, that's great when we're working with hardware, when we're working with Ableton or any other software, Logic as well. It's a very nice controller with Logic, and even with hardware as well. Of course, the Launchpad Pro, the kind of the flagship of the three in the range, has its own inbuilt sequencer and MIDI output, so it can be used totally standalone. Doesn't need a computer involved at all for you to to work with. It can be the sort of central hub of your studio. So that's a little bit kind of history of the Launchpad, but around about the same sort of time as the original Launchpad came through, there were a couple of folks up in Catskills, which I think is in New York State, and they had also created a grid controller called the Monom. Now, the Monom was essentially... here we go. Here is an old Monom. This is, again, a bank of 64 buttons, single colour buttons on here. And this thing, basically was the kind of the precursor to, to the Norns and all of the community that's grown up around Monom. And was really kind of, very much a community-led sort of project. I think originally it was a DIY project, and this is indeed a DIY Monom that I built, I think probably about 12 years ago, quite a long time ago. In fact, this was the very first DIY project I undertook. It took me a lot of time to build up the courage to get the soldering iron out and kind of put it all together. But I did, and it worked. It was great. And this would basically use a USB connection and connect to my computer. And then in the kind of in the Monom world, there were lots of different apps being created, or scripts, if you like. And these were all doing various different things. Like sample kind of players, sample cutters, uppers, whatever the term would be for that. A really nice little sort of nice project, and there were a couple of famous users of this as well. There's a guy called I think his name is Alfred Darlington, also goes by the name of Daedalus. He used a Monom, and actually I think also Deadmau5, when he was kind of right back in the early days with Deadmau5, he was using a Monom as well, and they did different sizes. This of course is the 64 button version, but this kit was called 40H. And I think the 40H is hexadecimal for 64. I'm not sure. It's a bit of a geeky, but that's one for the geeks to research there. But there was also a 128 button version, and also a huge 256 button version as well. Now, as time progressed with the Monom community and Monom as a company, they branched out into various different other places as well, such as, for example, some modular gear, and also into the world of kind of self-contained music computers. Actually, I've got the Monom website up on the screen here. I think it's, let's see, it's this button. Yes, here we go. And here is the monom.org website, and you can see here is, well, if I just scroll up, you can see at the very top here, that's the current version of their grid, which is again 128 buttons. But also underneath them, we've got the Norns computer. This is the full kit, not kit, sorry, I beg your pardon, the full kind of finished product that you can buy completed from them. And then if I scroll down a bit further, here we go. This is what we're going to be looking at this evening, the Shield, and that's what I have here in front of me here as well. And this is really kind of a bit of a DIY project again, as I say, based around a Raspberry Pi computer, which you can install in here. And then kind of the kit itself is very straightforward. It's this plastic casing, and pretty much all the soldering is done. You just have to put the thing together and install the software on there. And it's a very straightforward thing to build. Of course, the Norns computer is a lovely sort of standalone device that you can use just on its own. You don't need to necessarily use a grid or anything at all with it. A lot of the scripts that are available for it can be used just by the device. But when you add the grid to it, it really opens up a huge amount of additional sort of possibilities and things that you can do with the Norns. So that's what we're going to explore a little bit this evening. Now, as you can see here, this is a Launchpad X, so this is the kind of the middle Launchpad that we have in the range at the moment. This is, of course, set out with 64 buttons on here. Now, currently, I'm in note mode, so let's sort of just do something very, very simple. So I can just basically plug this thing in and do some stuff with it. It's very, very straightforward and very basic. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to my list of apps here, and I'm going to choose the first app that I want to just show, a thing called MX Synths. Now, this is a collection of various different synthesizers that have been programmed using a super collider, which is the language used for all the kind of the synthesizer engine and effects engine and that sort of thing within the Norns. So let's just load that in. Load that in here, and now I've got a series of different instruments that I can just basically tap through and play. Now, if I play on the Launchpad here, you'll see obviously I'm not getting any sound through, but if I just tap at the top button here, I can go through to my little menus, and I'll go through to the edit button here, just click through, and then go down to MX Synths here, and in here I could say, okay, let's see, Midi in, I beg your pardon, it's down at the bottom, Midi in. Now that's set to Launchpad X1. Well, there are different pipes, if you like, coming out of the Launchpad X, MIDI pipes, and I know that it's going to be Launchpad X2 that should speak to it. So I've just set that up now, Launchpad X2, let's go back, and now when I... There we go, we've got some sound. So we've got a nice way to be able to play these various different synthesizers. Let's see. I'm just going to bring the volume up a touch. There we go. And then, of course, I can use the controls here, the parameters, to play around with the sound. Not quite sure what each one of them's doing. This is one thing you will find with Norns. There's going to be a lot of kind of experimentation with this. So we can play around with the sound. So that's one way that we can use, the grid here as a control surface to basically control the Norns music computer. If I wanted to, I could maybe load up a different app. So let's go again to the loading page, select, and now I'm going to go to a thing called MX Samples, which is one of my favorite apps, or scripts as they're called in the Norns world. And this is this is basically a sample player. And it's so nice because you can just basically load in huge multi-sample banks into here. So yeah, let's go for some string sounds. Okay, so I'll just load that in. And again, no MIDI connected at the minute, so I'm just going to go across, go to edit, down to MIDI in, Launchpad X2, as we know, and then we can go back, and now... So again, a really nice way of being able to play. And again, I can just choose any sort of sound I'd like. Let's go for this one, yeah, tac piano, I like this one. So just tap that, loads in. Okay, so great, a great little couple of apps there just to give you some sounds to play with. Nice stuff. But the Norns really is a lot more than just kind of having, a keyboard attached to it to play different sounds. There are lots of these, as I've said, scripts that have been created for Norns, and these offer some really interesting approaches to music creation. I think for me, I've had the Norns now since the beginning of this year, and it's been a real eye-opener for me because it really just it basically can be whatever you want it to be if you've got the skills to be able to program it. Now, I don't have the skills to be able to program it myself, but there's a huge, huge community of people creating scripts pretty much all the time, and it's such a wonderful place, a wonderful little community in kind of in our world of music. It's a really friendly place, and everybody's helping each other out. I've never seen those four letters RTFM ever in the lines community. If you've not been, I'd recommend you go and just have a look. There's so much really interesting stuff, really interesting discussions and conversations, but also great scripts being written for Norns. So as I say, I mean, let's start to explore now how we can kind of use the grid a little bit more with the Norns to kind of push it into new sort of territories. So I'm going to go back to my, let's go back to the load screen. I'm going to select the opening gambit, the thing that pretty much everybody starts off with when you've populated your SD card and put it into your Norns and you fire it up. This is the app that will pretty much generally come up first. So this is called Awake, and I'll just load this in. Okay, now Awake is basically, let's just turn it down a touch again. Awake is basically kind of a sequencer based across two kind of areas. We've got kind of a main pitch level and then a transposition layer underneath it. Now you can see that's not really doing anything at all to the grid here. So let's just turn that off for a second. Now the Launchpad X here is just booted up into its standard note mode. So I need to put this into programmer's mode. Programmer's mode is a mode that had been added into the Launchpad series. Launchpad Minis, Launchpad X and Launchpad Pro in a very small firmware update that was put out. And basically this sort of puts it into kind of a legacy mode called programmer mode. And you can see that just right saying we're now in programmer mode. So let's just go back. And now you see I've got nothing in here. Okay, now the next thing is let's just load that up again and see what happens. I'm not expecting a great deal to actually happen at this point. So let's see. Okay, yeah, so this grid is not actually doing anything at the moment, but that's fine. That's fine. Let's just clear that out again, because this is where it gets a little bit kind of technical and a little bit, a little bit kind of interesting, really, to start to play around with things. Now, Norns has a very open source and kind of open approach to the script and the stuff that is kind of created for it. The scripts themselves are written in a language called Lua. Now, as I've said, I'm not a programmer in any way, shape or form, but Lua is kind of quite accessible, and with a little bit of patience and a little bit of study and practice, you can actually start to get to understand a little bit about it. Now, Awake is the kind of the stock app that we've just opened up, the stock app on the Norns. And if I had a standard a grid by Monom and I plugged that in, then that would just automatically work. But because we're working with devices that are not, made by Monom, they are, they're not necessarily supported by Monom directly. We have to go in and do a little bit of kind of editing to the scripts. So let's just take a quick look at that. Now, I'm going to go to let's go to the browser screen again. So let's just switch over to this. Yep, here we go. And so here's my browser. And if I go to the top here and just type in the word Maiden. You see it's already in there. And that's got a little IP address there. Now, the Norns, it being a Raspberry Pi, has got Wi-Fi inbuilt. So this is actually connected on my network at home here. And I can actually go into the Norns to access the internal kind of software side of Norns just by directly going to Maiden. So let's just enter into Maiden. And here it is loading up. And now we're into the Maiden screen. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, on this side here, I've got a whole load of kind of arrows that run and open up things. And the code section here is where the scripts live. And here I have Awake. Now, if I click on this, you'll see now we've got a library and actually the software, the actual program, the code that is running this software. And here it is. And basically in here is a little line that we're always looking out for that basically is the bit that sets the grid up. Now, if we just scroll down here, you see here I've got this little line, this G equals grid.connect, open close brackets. And that's the command, if you like, within the software that is going to tell the Norns if a grid is connected, connect to that and use it. Now, we don't have a grid. We're using a Launchpad. So we want to basically add a small line of code here that is going to allow us to essentially pretend that the Launchpad here is a grid. So now I've got to try and remember this line of code, but no matter, because I know I've got it in other apps somewhere. So I think the Awake MX Samples version here should have it. So if I just click underneath here, scroll down, and here it is. Here's that line of code that I want. So I'm just going to copy that. Okay. And then I'm going to go back up to Awake here, and I'm just going to paste it. Okay. Now, actually, I'm just going to quickly edit this, and the reason is that I'm not using 128 pads. I'm just using 64. So I'm actually just going to use this thing called Midi Grid. Now, a quick word on Midi Grid. To be able to make this work, you need to have installed on your Norns an app called Midi Grid. And I'm just going to quickly save this. I'm just going to hit the save button up in the top corner here, and that's just going to confirm, save that into the code line here. Now, just a quick word here. Here's Midi Grid, and if we just look at the library here, we can have a look, and you can see we've got all of these different kind of devices and stuff that are in there. And these are all the devices that are actually supported by Midi Grid. This is a wonderful kind of side app, if you like, a little app that sits in the background. It doesn't actually do anything itself other than allow any kind of grid-based device to connect into your scripts. So that's the Midi Grid, and you can see here, it says here, local grid include Midi Grid, lib, library, and then the file Midi Grid. And so basically it's going to just bring in this into my Awake app. So let's just close this down again now, and we'll go back to Awake and just make sure that it's saved. Let's see, it is saved, because if I make any changes, so if I kind of delete a letter here, you'll see it goes red. Well, let's put the P back in, or actually, yeah, we'll just make it a capital, and then I'll just hit the save button again. And you can see here, I've got this local grid, include Midi Grid, lib, Midi Grid. Okay, great stuff. Now, let's go back to let's go back to the Norns. Let's turn on Awake now. So let's hit Awake. And there we go. We've now got the grid here, this Launchpad acting as if it was a grid connected to the Norns software. And now you can see it's kind of running. And if I just take these notes off, you can see now I've kind of deleted that sequence, and you can hopefully see, I know it's not the most ideal kind of zoom in on the screen here, but hopefully you can see that I can add these kind of things in here. And if I press a button here on the Norns, I can switch down to the transpose layer, and I can just maybe just transpose everything. Just do this here. Okay, so you can see now how we can start to use you know, the Launchpad here, the Launchpad X, as a controller for the Norns. And it's really, really nice to be able to just play these kind of sequency things in. So that's kind of nice. Okay. So what else can we do? Well, let's go back out, and we'll just clear that out now. So we've seen how we can start to put the stuff in. Now, there is one thing here on the Awake app that we can actually, at the minute, we're just using Awake to basically train across these 8 steps. It's an 8-step sequence, if you like. But actually, in Awake, you can actually extend that sequence up to 16, and you can kind of make bigger sequence patterns. But of course, we're dealing with a single grid here. So with the Launchpad X, of course, I've only got 64 pads on here. But if I grab my let's just unplug this for now. Just put this to one side. Here I've got a Launchpad Mini Mark III and a Launchpad Mini Mark III, 2 of them. And of course now I have 128 pads. So let's just plug these fellows in. Okay. Now, once again, I've got to put these into programmer mode, which I can very quickly and easily do. You press and hold the session button, tap the orange button there. That's in program mode. Let's do the same for sessions here. Press program mode. There we go. Now, if I load in Awake once again, so let's load that in. I've got them the wrong way around, no matter. Let's just flip them round like that. Sometimes it just needs to kind of, have I got that the right way around? Yeah, I think I have, yeah. So, yeah, sometimes you might need to just do that to kind of make sure they're working. But you can see they're kind of just repeating each other. It's just the same thing. If I press this button, it'll shift here. If I press this button, it'll shift here. Again, if I go to my kind of control layer, it's just repeating. Now, the reason for that, of course, is that I have basically just set it up to be a 64-button grid controller. If you remember, if we go back to the maiden screen here, if we look at the library, the grid controls here, local grid include Midi Grid, library, Midi Grid. And that's basically saying, okay, just treat it as if it was just a single 64 pad set of controls. Now, I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning, I altered this. And where it says Midi Grid there, I'm going to say MG, and then we'll say underscore 128. And that's Midi Grid 128. Now, once again, if I just look at my Awake Lua file here, it's red. So that needs to be saved. Sorry, my mouse isn't showing, is it, on the screen? I do apologise, but hopefully you can see what I'm looking at here. So I'm going to click on the Save button up in the top right-hand corner again. Save script. Save that. Oh, hang on. Let's see. It's just lost it. Let's just put that back in. MG underscore 128. And now we'll hit Save. Okay. Okay, so let's go again. Once again, we'll load in the script. So Awake. There we go. So now you can see I can add these steps, but they're not coming into the screen. They're not part of it. We now have two separate Launchpad Minis connected together as if it was one whole 128 set of pads. And again, now if I just scroll across, I think, which one is it now? Here we go, loop. Now I can make that longer. And now I can use that extended pattern here to add extra notes in. So this is really neat. Now, of course, we're listening to a sound that's being produced directly in the Monom. But if I want, I can go over to my parameters here, go to Edit, and I could go down to Output. And we could say, okay, well, that's going to audio, but let's just send it to MIDI instead. And I think it's going to go out to MIDI device 1. Yep, which should be my trusty Buchla here. Yes, it is. And if I just bring up the volume a bit now. So I've got a great sequencer for my Buchla. So you can have a lot of fun doing this as a sequence controller for the Buchla, of course. Or maybe let's say, okay, let's change the MIDI device. Let's go MIDI out channel, we'll go to 15, which is now going over to the Summit. So again, already I've got a really nice little sequence system to control any of the instruments in the room, or even if I wanted to, let's just go back to, let's just take that off because we have an arpeggiator on. Let's go back to output and we'll go back to audio, and we can just use the internal sounds on the Norns itself. So really neat. Let's just take off the app again. Okay, so that's kind of a real kind of basic start, if you like, looking at the grid, looking at the launch pads as a grid, looking at the Norns, and also taking a little look at some of the code as well that we need to be able to make this sort of thing work. So let's see, I'm going to just have a quick look in the chat now. I can see there's a lot of a lot of stuff going on there. Hello everybody. Yeah, let's see if we've got any questions. Yeah, well, one question there, this is interesting, is Monom multi-timbre would be so nice to have 4 engines controlled by a Launchpad Pro Mark 3 on 4 tracks. That's a good question. It's not, how can I put this? Norns is basically, it opens up standalone kind of instances. So the scripts that are written are kind of standalone, but again, with clever kind of programming and stuff. And again, there's a lot of people doing all of this sort of stuff and sharing it so freely and wonderfully in the community. The community, by the way, is called Lines, and you get to it by just tapping the L button on your keyboard, L for Lego, whatever. Tap that 8 times .co. So L. I lost count, but anyway, that .co, and you'll see in there that there's there's just so much stuff going on in there, and there's obviously a lot of access to the different apps as well. So, but it's not multi-timbral in the sense that you can use multiple apps at the same time, multiple scripts at the same time. But that said, there are some interesting things that will let you do the sorts of things that you're asking about. So let's just go down. I'm going to see if I can find it. Now, this is an app called O-O. Here it is, O-O. And I think if I look at my script, let's just have a quick look. So go back here. And apologies, you can't see my mouse pointer, but let me just scroll down, and O-O is here. And if I look at the Lua file here, now, it might well be that it's not actually in here. So if I can't see it, what I can do is I can press Command and F and type grid, and then I can just scroll through the different instances of grid. And what I'm looking for is not in here. However, there's a little hint here. Local grid include O-O library grid. So that makes me think that in the library is another sort of little kind of aspect to the software, to the script called grid. If I click on here, let's see. So let's scroll down. Where is it? Now I should have thought about this before I did this on a live stream, but let's find grid. Let's see if I can find grid connect. Well, let me just do that search again. So Command F. I'm going to look for connect, because that should take me to it if it is in this. Aha. Here we go. And actually, this has already been placed in here, because this is the line. This is a line of code that I haven't placed in there. It's already there. But you can see again, G equals grid _ device dot connect, open close brackets. And then above that, we've got that same kind of line, although this is a little longer, because this is saying, okay, if you're using Midi Grid or a Launchpad or any other kind of grid device that isn't the standard Monom grid, include the Midi Grid library, Midi Grid 128, or Grid, which is the stock grid library. And that means if you've got a grid, the Monom grid, it'll work. If you've got a Launchpad Mark III, it's just going to work as well. But let's take a look at this app. So I'm going to open it up. Let's go down back over here. We'll go O-O, load, and this will load in. Okay, now you can see we've got a very different layout now on the on the pads. This is really quite an interesting app, and this is one of the things I think I find with the Norns is that it just makes you think about how to create music in a very different kind of way. There's some very kind of how can I put it? Very intelligent kind of approaches to making music, but just very kind of off the grid. That's a terrible pun, sorry, but really different ways of working. You really kind of takes you off piste, and it really works well. So let's just see. So I'm gonna, this is O-O, and basically this is kind of, I believe it's based around kind of Euclidean rhythms being connected, but also we can kind of connect the dots here to start to make things happen. So I'm going to press one pad here, and now you can see I've got this nice kind of, if you see on the screen hopefully, I've got this kind of link between those two positions on the grid, two different notes, and these kind of rhythms that are cascading across are the things that are triggering these notes. So if I add some more perhaps, there we go. And again, because it's kind of using these sort of random rhythm approaches, it's basically creating different, kind of a totally always generative kind of approach. So let's move on a bit. Let's go to another screen. And I can use these buttons here to get to different things. So here's a page for kick drum. Now I do know if I press some pads down here, this side, they're going to be a bit slower. But if I go up at the top here, these faster. The range of the kick sound should be a bit quicker. So let's move on, let's go to the snare, and let's just add some snare parts to it. Now I'm kind of, to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of randomly just sort of putting these spots in, but things are quite interesting as they're coming through. Let's go to the bass part here. Let's add some bass notes. So we've got, with very, very little kind of, minimal effort really, we've got something really interesting going on here. Now, of course, again here, I'm using internal sounds. I'm using the sounds that are provided in this particular script. Now, I know this script is written by a guy called Zach, whose moniker on the Lines forum is Infinite Digits. Now, he's become a bit of a hero of mine, I have to say. He's absolutely stunning, and he's kind of making scripts pretty much like on a weekly basis, and they're really, really great scripts. In fact, a lot of the scripts we've looked at already are kind of some of Zach's things. They're really, really nice things. So yeah, but once again, I could say, okay, let's get the bass back in. And once again, if I go to my parameters here, so I'll go to edit parameters, and I could go to, now let's see, which one do I want? I think if I go to the bass part here, I could say, okay, where is it? MIDI out. There we go, MIDI out. And let's set that to my TM3. And once again now, the buchla should be following that. And I can then say, okay, well, let's go back page. Let's take that lead part. Let's go instead of, well, in fact, let's just take the engine off. Sound. Oh, yeah, I've got to drop the volume for that. But no worries, we'll keep that on for the minute. Let's go to MIDI out. And once again, I'm going to choose TM1, which is my USB MIDI interface, which is connected here. And I'll go to MIDI out channel 15 is what I have my summit set to. Now, which part was that? Let's see, I can't quite remember. Oh yeah, part 1. Okay, the lead part. So let's bring that in. So now we're using the internal sounds, but I'm also sending MIDI out to the different places as well. So let's bring the rest in. So again, really interesting stuff. Let's go back to, let's just switch that off for now. So again, that's another really nice thing. Now we've only looked at 2 scripts so far, maybe with the sound scripts as well, but yeah, we've got a lot of stuff in here, heck of a lot of stuff. So for example, let's think of another one. Let's go to, where should we go to now? Now, if you look at my list here, in fact, I can show you. Let's just go to the screen here again. The left column here are all the different scripts that I've got on this device. These are all individual scripts that run and do different things. And, you know, there's just so much stuff. Now, some of it's grid-based, some of it isn't grid-based, some of it's just really interesting kind of, just kind of utilities. Some of it are amazing effects, some of it is amazing samplers as well. Let's try, oh, I know what, yeah, there's one here called GoldenEye, which is this one here. GoldenEye on the left-hand column. Let's go to that. This is another great one. So if I scroll down on my Norns, let's go to, this screen here. Let's see, GoldenEye. And this is a bit similar actually to O-O. Again, it's using Euclidean rhythm stuff. There we go, GoldenEye. And this just takes a moment to load. But now I can kind of just add some drum sample. Now these are samples. So I'm, again, just randomly sort of putting stuff in here, but you can start to build up these really interesting and intricate rhythms, again, just by using this kind of, this grid interface. and obviously the software as well. Now let's just see here. I wonder if this is, let's go to edit. I'm going to go to my clock, source MIDI, yep. I have my trusty circuit rhythm here. So that's obviously sending the clock here. In fact, if I just change the tempo on circuit rhythm, yeah, you can see it's changing it here. But I'm going to go back to 120 because I think I've got some sample loops in there that are at 120 beats per minute. And if I just kind of, let's go to, yeah, I've got something here. Just bring the filter down so it's not too crazy. So already I've just got a kind of a very simple single kind of loop going on. Let's bring in and I can use this pot here to kind of bring in lots of random sort of stuff as well. I can take it down. So you can kind of use this as a nice fill thing. And sometimes it works, sometimes it gets a bit crazy. But again, just a really, really nice thing going on. Now, I think my Summit is still playing around in the background. Yes. Yeah, I turned the app off before it had got a MIDI note off message, so I just had a MIDI note hang. But yeah, so that's another one, GoldenEye, really nice. Let's go back now. I'm going to look at one. Now, this is quite a famous one. This is one that was originally for the original Monom, for this beast here, the original Monome Grid. It was called MLRV back in the day. This is now called MLR. And MLR is basically kind of this sort of really strange sample kind of performance thing. So let's just go for MLR, load that in, and just takes a moment. I think if I just, yeah, kind of redraw it a little bit. Yeah, it just takes a moment sometimes for the grid to just get itself back into position. Let me see. If I bring up the little, let's see if I got it. Yep. Yep, I've got the auxiliary from my mixing console running through into the Norns, into the audio input here. And if I, yeah, now you can see it's a totally different page. Now, this is one thing I would say about working with Norns. It is just so wide, and there's so many different kind of scripts, so many different ways of working that, yeah, each kind of thing has its own interface. And once again, this just looks like okay, what does this mean? Well, again, with a little bit of looking into it, you can kind of work your way through it. It's, you know, initially you might scratch your head for a little bit, as I frequently do, but after a little bit of research and a little bit of practice, you get quite used to sort of things. So what I'm going to do is, I know that if I press this button here, it's going to take me to a different page. And if I just set this up here, I'm going to just set up this kind of, I suppose you could call that maybe, I don't know, a buffer. That's basically the area that I can record into. And if I go down here, back to the initial page, I can hit the record button here, and then I'm just going to go quickly over to the Summit and play a couple of notes. Just going to find a sound first. Okay. Now, let's see, yes. So I had the foresight to put a microphone on this side tonight for the first time, so I could still hopefully speak. Now, let's see, where did I put this patch? Doesn't particularly matter, but maybe it was in the 80s. Let's see. Aha! So I'm going to just quickly set up a very quick kind of arpeggio. Okay, so back here, I've just got the sequence running, the arpeggiator running here. Now if I hit the record button, which is this button here, you see, it's just run the way through. And I hope we should start to hear that sound coming back through on the Norns. Let's see. Okay, it's a little quiet on that one. Let's move to another track and do the same thing, because I think I can do it there as well. And let's just hit record on that track as well. Okay, let's hit record. And if I want to, I can overdub this as well. So kind of use it as a little bit of a kind of a delay effect. Let's take it out of record now. Yeah, let's just stop that first one. Okay, nice. If I then go to, let's see. Let's go to the next track. And once again, set this up here. It'll all hopefully come clear in a moment what I'm aiming to do. That was nice. Okay, so I'm just basically finding some stuff to feed it. So let's just see. Okay, let's just hit record again. There we go. Great. Now, I can basically stop those and start them again as I want. I can now play with the sounds. And if I want to, I can actually I can go into this page as well and start to play. Start to cut up the samples. I can record that as well. Let's see. So I've got this kind of interesting way of being able to play with these parts, and so from taking that arpeggio, we're going into some really interesting and strange places. And again, I can go back to this page and play around with the speed. Reverse it. Do you see we've got a lot of stuff that we can do here? So, I mean, yeah, let's close this one off now. Okay, so that was MLR, and it's basically this kind of sampler that allows you to then go in and start to cut up the samples and start to basically repurpose them in the ways that you want. Really, really wonderful app. And this is, again, this is from a guy called Tane. I think that's how you would say it. I've been kind of following this guy for a long time, but I've never understood how to actually say his handle. But basically, yeah, he's the guy who designed the original Monom, designed the Norns and all of the stuff. Basically, Tane is Monom, and this is again one of his wonderful apps that again is completely free and completely available to those using a Norns device. Now, just looking at the time, we're moving quite quickly, moving through time quite quickly here. I'm going to go to, I'm going to probably finish up with probably my favourite app of all of these, my favourite script. I keep saying apps. That's one way of thinking of them, but they're actually called scripts. But let's say, so this one is, again, one from Zach, one from Infinite Digits. And instead of O-O, this one's called, 6 O's. But I genuinely love this. This is amazing. In fact, I mean, I've said this before, but for me, the price of building this Norn Shield is worth it for this script alone. It is just stunning. So let's just load this in. Now, here's an interesting thing. Again, you can see this is completely mirrored. This is I've got two of the same grid here. So let's just quickly jump back to my my maiden window. Here we go, and I'll just find OO in the list on the left hand side, which is here. And again, if I click on OO here, I have a feeling, the grid is going to be in one of the libraries. So let's just go to library, Grido. There we go. And let's see, where's my grid.connect, open, close brackets, there it is. And just above it, you can see the line that I put in before, include Midi Grid, library, lib, Midi Grid. And what I want to do is actually change that to MG128. Not forgetting the underscore, important stuff. Yeah, when you are putting lines in here, you know, the computer is pretty thick. It will only do what you tell it to do. So if I get that line wrong, it's not going to actually work. But now we've got the Midi Grid 128 version in there. Saved it with the save tool up at the top. And let's go back now to OO, and let's reload it. Hopefully you'll see a difference. If you notice here, I've got the two things mirrored. But if I go just reload that in, Okay, yeah, there we go. It's now spread across. Now, actually, ooh will work with a single grid, or will give you more resolution, more control over 2 grids. So, what the heck is this thing? Why do I like it so much? This is basically a looper. But it's more than a looper in many ways. It's based around these 6 rings. If you can see on the in the Norns window here, it's based around 6 rings, and these can be set to different lengths. They're actually set here in seconds, so we can see that the first loop here is set to, I don't know if you can read that on your screen, but it says 2 seconds. That's this first loop here. But if I want to, I can make that bigger. So I can make that maybe as big as the other one. And now it's 12 seconds. I mean, I can go beyond 12 seconds if I want, but let's make it a more appropriate 4 seconds, or 4.5. That's fine. Okay. So I can see I'm selected here, part 1. I've got a sound. Yeah, I've got a sound there on the summit. Do I want that sound? No. Now, yeah, we'll go for something nice and ambient-y for this. I think it's going to work well. Okay, great. And let's get the VCA up a touch. Oh, it's already up. Let's get more volume. Great. So these buttons, which aren't marked here, these allow me to play, stop, or record. Now, if I go to record here, it's in a threshold record. Actually, quite similar to the way that the circuit rhythm works. It's going to wait for a signal to appear at the inputs before it goes into loop mode. So I'm just going to move over to the summit just to play some stuff, and you'll see when I hit the summit, when I make a sound go into the Norns, it's going to automatically record, and it's going to form the first loop. Let's try that. You can see now we've got that running. Let's get a bit more volume on that. So that's the first loop. Let's go to another loop here. Let's go to this one, and I'm going to get a different sound now on the summit. And again, I'm going to record arm this, so it's ready for a signal to hit. Okay, so that's working. Let's go to the next one, this one here. Get a different sound. So now I can pause these or play them. Yep, play button. I can also go to different pages here, and this is where again it gets really quite interesting. If I press this page here, it should say, I don't know what that's, oh yeah, pitch, of course. So this is pitch. And I can go backwards, or and this is the same for all of the loops. Go back to the pitch page. Let's go to this page here. This is where things get really nice. I think this is volume. So let's see, we're going to take an LFO onto the volume here of that first part, and we're going to make it bounce around there. And you can start to see the loop move around now in the window. Let's do the same for, let's just keep that a little lower though for part 2. And I'm going to just add some for the others as well. They're not all recorded. So that's great. So that's the volume. You've got this nice way of being able to bounce the volume around, but why don't we do that with the panning as well? So let's do this on part 1. Actually, let's change the speed for this one. And now you can hopefully see that these loops are kind of bouncing around the place. Ooh. Where are we? Ah, that's no LFO, is it? Yeah, there we go. It's nice and slow. So you can do some really incredible things building this up. It's really, really lovely stuff. Really is. Anyway, yeah, just looking at the time, I've been wittering on for about an hour. I could probably witter on for about a whole week on this stuff. Yeah, it's really, really lovely stuff. I mean, there's so much more that Ooh can do as well, of course. We've just had a little look at it, but how we can use this grid, this integration into the launch pads or into the grid, of course, if you are a grid user as well. It's just really wonderful stuff. Let's go to that one. It's a bit too high, I think. There we go. Some lovely lovely ambient kind of stuff. Instant ambient using Ooh. Anyway, we'll finish off for now. I'll just have a quick look through the chat as well, just to see if there's anything that I need to answer or apologise for. Let's see. Oh, Nothing Pretty About Synths has asked, can it be chained like 16 launch pads? I suppose it possibly could be. However, most of the scripts that are written are being written pretty much generally for the Monom grid, of course. The launch. Oh yeah, quick word on the Launchpad Mark III, of course, is a little bit less expensive than the grid. I'm not going to say anything bad about the grid because I think it's absolutely a stunning product. You know, having been a Monom user, even way before I joined Novation, you know, I'm a big fan of the stuff that they make. And of course, this is kind of hacking. We're kind of having to go into the scripts to kind of just make a quick adaptation to them to get them to work with the Launchpad. I guess, you know, the reality is, you know, if somebody was minded to, I guess they could probably think about making something that uses more than just 2 launch pads or 1 grid. I'm not aware of any apps, but, you know, there are so many things out there. There probably are some that are already using that. But 16 launch pads would be a bit of a handful, I think. But, yeah, who knows? Who knows? Let's see. Okay. With a cheat sheet for unlabeled buttons on the second screen, maybe. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, one thing. Hey, Wagyu, by the way, good to see you, man. Yeah, one of the things that can be a bit confusing, but this is again like kind of any musical instrument. You know, you are faced with this kind of strange kind of layout. I mentioned that when we looked at MLR, and you know, it kind of looks different to all of the other apps, and every script, I should say, every script that we've looked at has a different kind of look to it. But, you know, if you look at a trumpet, that looks different to a violin. You just have to sit and learn how to play that thing. So, you know, it's kind of, it's not inaccessible. It's actually very straightforward. And, of course, there's so much help on the forums. In fact, let me just show you, yeah, very quickly, just before I finish off. Let's go back to here, and I'm going to just quickly go to the Lines community. Lines... I'll load in, hopefully. Yep, here we go. And I was going to, just before, I was thinking about demonstrating Otis, which is another incredible script. And I had a quick look at the Lines community, and I looked at Otis, and I saw that just this evening, Just Matt is the name of the guy who has written this script, has updated Otis, like 30 minutes before I was due to go live. Now, I didn't update it live on a live stream. I figured that would be a bit dodgy. But he's added more grid support into his Otis looper. This is another looper. And you can see here as an outline of what these do. So, you know, all of these sorts of scripts, you know, if somebody is adding grid control to it, you should find yeah, you should find the information that you need. It's a really great place, this the Lines community. As I say, there it is up at the top. I'm sorry you can't see my mouse again, but I'll just highlight it. You see 8lines.co. Line is an L, which makes it so easy to get to with a quick, with yeah, just highlight there, just tap. There it is. Off we go. Anyway, right, I'm going to finish up now. Let's, yeah. I hope it's been interesting. It's, as I say, it's been a little bit off grid. This, there's that pun again. A little bit off piece tonight. We've been looking at the launch pads, but in a way that they've not really been designed to be used. But however, they do provide a really, really helpful and powerful solution. You know, as I say, the grid itself is a wonderful piece of gear, but the launch pads make it a bit more accessible in terms of, you know, it's a bit lower cost. Certainly on the Launchpad Mark 3s, 2 of those comes in a little bit less than the grid itself. It's a different experience. You know, the grid is really, really well designed, of course, as is the Launchpad Mark 3, but it has got a different feel, different, you know, different kind of feel to it. And also, you know, the shield that I'm using, the Norns shield here, this one, again, this is like a kind of slightly more cost-effective way into that world of oh, sorry, wrong screen, into that world of the Norns. You can buy a ready assembled Norns, which is a little bit more expensive, or you can go for the kind of the DIY version. I think the Raspberry Pi is about, I can't remember the price, I think it's about £35 for the actual computer that goes into here, and then of course the price of the shield on top. And the shield comes pretty much ready assembled. You just have to kind of get a screwdriver out and put it all together, get an SD card, and load it in, and away it goes. So yeah, it's a really wonderful wonderful thing. And you know, I mentioned before, I've kind of been looking at it throughout this year, pretty much. I think it was early on this year that I got hold of the Norns, and I've been really blown away with what it can do. But I think most of all with the community surrounding it and all these really generous people building and sharing the apps that they're working with. And yeah, it's just a wonderful place to be. Anyway, right, we'll finish up for now. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you at the next live stream. It's been a pleasure to talk about this, for me to geek out a little bit tonight on something a little bit off the beaten path. I didn't say off the grid that time, but anyway, there we go. Yeah. Great stuff. I hope it's been of interest to you. Thanks very much for sticking by,